Nashua! My name is Sarah, and I'm the Nashua organizer for Pete Buttigieg's campaign. I've met many of you already, and I'm looking forward to hopefully meeting you all soon. I've been in Nashua for about a month and a half now, and even though it wasn't easy to leave behind my family, friends, and community to move to a completely new place, Pete's message inspired and motivated me to pack my bags and move to New Hampshire, and what I've found here is a new family among Team Pete. I've been truly amazed by the kindness and compassion that this community has showed to me as a newcomer. You have introduced me to your family and friends, invited me to community gatherings and family dinners, and opened your homes to me, and I just wanted to take a moment to say thank you. We are living in a political climate that is disheartening and divisive, yet Pete is bringing everyone together to reestablish what our country stands for and what our country's values are. He makes me hopeful for the first time in a long time that we can actually achieve the necessary changes that our country and our government so desperately need. Pete sees that we have the opportunity to create a society where everyone feels included and where our differences make us stronger. And that begins here with you all in the first in the nation primary state. Yes, woohoo! We need you if we're gonna be able to achieve this, and you will be the reason why we win the era. So please go to PeteForAmerica.com or text Pete to 25859 to sign up for more information, and find someone in the back with a clipboard and add your name to meet with me or another member of our team to learn more information. Thank you, and thank you again for being so welcoming. Now I'd like to introduce Mackenzie Murphy. She is a Nashua Community College graduate from here.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Is everyone so excited to see Mayor Pete? Well, welcome everyone. I'm so excited to be here. I'm so excited to be back here at this college. As Sarah said, I came here 2 years ago. I got my associate's degree, and I was so ecstatic when they asked me to introduce Mayor Pete to all of you tonight. So welcome everyone. For me, until a few months ago, I never knew who Pete was. I heard, oh, you should meet Mayor Pete. You should hear him speak. I was like, who the heck is Mayor Pete? Then I got to meet one of our state representatives, Matt Wilhelm, who's also a former AmeriCorps alum. And he told me about Mayor Pete's national call to service, his first major policy proposal that he's proposed. When I heard about that, and having served, here as an AmeriCorps, I actually did my year of AmeriCorps right here at this college, working with low-income students, our clubs and organizations here at the college, and helping those students navigate their way to higher education. And that was something that for me was so life-changing, to see from the first day that they started here to the last day, their last 2 years, the 2 years that they spent here at the college, to see the transformation. And there are so many people like myself who want to serve in AmeriCorps, who want to serve in Peace Corps, but they're not able to. We have a lack of funding to provide for those positions. We have a lack of resources. So I think Mayor Pete's national call to service, major policy proposal, is going to help us to get more AmeriCorps members and more Peace Corps members able to serve throughout this. Another big thing that really stuck to me about Mayor Pete's campaign is working in a higher education environment, being in college myself, having student loan debt. That's something that we are facing. New Hampshire has one of the highest rates of tuition. That's something that all of our states are facing. Kids can't afford to go to college because they have so much student debt. They can't afford a home. They can't afford, their retirement savings plan. So higher education is something that, as a country, I know Mayor Pete will tackle when he gets to the White House. And I'm just super excited to continue to watch him. I'm excited to be here. So it is my complete honor and pleasure to introduce to you tonight, Mayor Pete Buttigieg.
Wow, what a fantastic group. Thanks so much for coming out. Thanks one more time, Mackenzie, for that great introduction. We'll hear a bit more from her later, but I want to thank all of you for taking the time and for caring enough about our country to get together and talk about what we're going to do to make things better. We are at a difficult moment in the life of this nation. We are at a chaotic and unstable and frightening and divided moment. But I believe that it is in our hands to change all of that, not just for the moment, but for the era that is ahead of us. I think we are lucky and unlucky enough to be among those Americans who get to be alive making decisions when the country reaches a fork in the road. And this is about a lot more than who is the president today, although Lord knows we're going to need a new president. When we got folks choosing between whether to buy prescription drugs or whether to buy groceries, and the president's focus is on whether to buy Greenland, we got a problem. When he was serious about buying Greenland but joking about the Medal of Honor, we got a problem. There is something deeply wrong in the White House, but I would argue that we would not have gotten to this moment if there were not something even deeper going on. In other words, I don't think a person like the current president can ever get within cheating distance of the Oval Office unless there's a deeper crisis that is destabilizing our politics. And I think we've got to respond to that too. We've got to respond to the fact that really for as long as I've been alive, our political and economic systems have not been keeping up with our realities. We got an economy where the GDP is going up and life expectancy has been going down. We got a climate that is increasingly losing its ability to support our way of life. We've got endless war with no plan to get out of it. Sooner or later, this comes to a breaking point, and we're at that breaking point. But it is up to us, it is upon us, and I think it is within our power to do something completely different. And that's where I come in. That's why I'm running for president. With your help. Now, what does that better way look like? What does it look like to build a presidency that can actually handle those problems in the moment? Well, first and foremost, before we get to the policies, and we'll come to that in a minute, we got to anchor ourselves in our values. And this will be the campaign that breaks the spell that has people thinking that the word values is automatically a Republican or a conservative idea, because we're talking about not conservative values, but American values that are best honored with progressive policies. That has implications. If we're serious about freedom here in the state that lives by the creed of live free or die, then we need policies that recognize that there's more to freedom than just cutting a regulation on a bank somewhere. That if we really want to deliver freedom, if we really want to experience liberty, we have to deliver policies that give us health care, because you're not free if you don't have health care coverage. It holds you back from living a life of your choosing. But we're also proposing a Medicare for all who want it system that gives people the freedom to choose a publicly provided Medicare option that I believe is going to be a lot better than any of the corporate options out there, without kicking anybody off the plan they've already got, letting them vote with their feet, which is the classic American way, and moving us to universal health care coverage that way. We want to talk about freedom. Let's make sure we are securing the freedom associated with a woman's right to choose, so that it's never being dictated by politics. And we need more men to be feminists out there backing up women fighting for their rights. This is what it means to be serious about freedom. If you're serious about freedom, that means we ought to be free to decide who to marry without a county clerk telling us who our spouse ought to be based on their version of their religion. I think freedom comes by way of the ability to organize for a good day's pay for a good day's work, which is why we're the ones who stand with organized labor. And I got a plan to shore up unionization, knowing that it is the unions that have built up our middle class, and it is the attack on unions that has helped lead to the stagnation of wages in this country. Economic freedom is freedom too. And I believe freedom comes by way of education, which is why it's time for a Secretary of Education who actually believes in public education. We could be uniting around these American values. We should be uniting around the value of patriotism. Let's put an end to the idea that patriotism belongs to one side of the aisle, especially these days. We gather under a flag that is not a Republican flag, but an American flag. One that I saluted when I was in uniform, knowing that it represented the not just freedom, but obligation to speak up when our leaders are doing the wrong thing. And when we do, we should not be accused of being disloyal to the republic for which it stands, let alone told to go back to where we came from. We should be recognized for participating in the American tradition of debate. Patriotism, security. At a time when national security is going to require more from us than ever before. But 21st century security threats like cybersecurity and election security are not going to be dealt with using a 17th century security strategy like just putting up a wall. It's not that easy. There's a lot more to keeping America safe at a moment when one of the things that endangers our lives is white nationalist violence that needs to be called out as such and fought by the United States of America. National security means ensuring that the Second Amendment is never twisted and warped into a death sentence for thousands of Americans because we're not willing to implement common sense gun safety reform. And if we're serious about security, we have got to be ready to treat climate disruption as the security challenge of our time, nationally and globally. We have to lead on this. And one more thing about security in the age of endless war. From now on, authorizations for war ought to have a sunset, so that if a president really needs to keep troops deployed overseas, they should have to go back to Congress every 3 years and make the case. And Congress should be ready to step up, because if we have troops who can summon the courage to go overseas and put their lives on the line for this country, then our members of Congress ought to be able to have the courage to take tough votes on whether or not it's appropriate to send them there. So let's rally around these values that bring us together, freedom and security that do not belong to a political party, just like God does not belong to a political party. We stand for people of any religion and no religion equally, because that is part of the very founding idea of this country. And those of us who are guided by religious faith ought to know that there's a choice. That at a time when we're seeing what we're seeing on the southern border, when we're seeing what we're seeing in budgets that take food aid out of the hands of the hungry, knowing that... I'll just talk loud till the new mic comes. There we go. Oh, we're back. That was quick. We are commanded by every faith tradition I've ever heard of to concern ourselves with the well-being of the marginalized, with identifying with the prisoner, feeding the hungry, clothing the naked, welcoming the stranger. So don't let anybody tell you that Christian faith or any faith necessarily means you got to vote Republican. Not when we're seeing what we're seeing out of this White House. We have a choice. And the choice has never been clearer. Now, the way we exercise that choice is through our democracy. And our democracy's not in the best shape at this moment. It's not a democracy, in my view, or even a democratic republic, if dollars can outvote people. If districts can be drawn to where politicians are picking out their voters instead of the other way around, that's not democratic. If our fellow U.S. citizens from Puerto Rico to D.C. don't have proper representation, we got some work to do in building up our democracy. Good news is we can do something about that. It's why I've proposed a 21st Century Voting Rights Act that makes sure everybody can exercise the right to vote in this country. The mayor's eye view of the world is when there's a problem, you find a solution. We have a problem in our democracy and our society with people being divided against each other, with people who are not even recognizing as fellow Americans people who have a different background. There's a solution for that, and part of it has to do with creating 1 million paid national service opportunities so that Americans can have the common bond of working together on something hard, just like I had in the military, but without having to go to war in order to get there. That's something we can do. Then I propose that we make it happen. We have a problem with systemic racism in this country, which is why I'm proposing that we have a solution as ambitious and bold as the Marshall Plan that rebuilt Europe, but this time invest right here in America. When the black experience puts you almost in a different country on health, on education, on access to everything from the vote to credit in order to start a small business, we need more minority entrepreneurs. We need health equity across the land. We need better housing. We got a plan. When we see a problem with rural communities losing population, we have got to act on that. We need a federal government that will support communities developing their plans to get connected, innovate, and build up jobs. And we need to support immigration as part of the solution for communities that need not only more jobs, but more people, and have more people who are willing to be right here in rural America if we make it possible. And today we've been traveling the state talking about the problem, the crisis really, in mental health and addiction. It deserves to be named and it deserves action. No longer can this be treated as a marginal issue or a specialty issue because it affects all of us. All of us. And we have to act. What does that look like? It means enforcing parity so that health insurance companies actually have to treat mental health conditions and provide for mental health visits just as much as we do for physical health. It means training our police officers and our teachers on how to recognize signs of mental health issues, but also equipping them with a place to send people when they do identify those issues by making sure we have the providers that we need when it comes to mental health. It means building up our defenses as a country, our defenses to the risk posed by mental health, addiction, and suicide risk. It's why there ought to be a 3-digit number linking to the National Suicide Prevention Hotline, so it is that easy to tell somebody where to go. And it is time to break the silence that has people struggling with mental health issues or addiction thinking that they're alone. Because we're not 1 in 5 Americans will experience a mental health challenge. So people who are experiencing that need to know, and their loved ones too, that there's nothing to be ashamed of. We need to talk about these issues as openly as we would talk about cancer or a twisted ankle or diabetes, because lives are on the line. And if we get this right, if you just do the math on deaths from despair, from alcohol, drugs, and suicide, and you look at what will happen in the next 10 years if we don't do something different, it means that if we act, if we can cut by half the deaths from despair, in this country we will save 1 million lives. How can we not? How can we not act and do that? Let's make it happen together. That's what this is about. Not easy fixes, but real solutions to get something done. And these are problems that will be with us even when we've gotten a new president. So we need to sink our teeth into this and realize that we can't spend all our time and energy talking about him. He's got this show going, right? It's quite a show. It's like a reality show, or a game show, or a horror show. And the thing with horror shows is you can't look away. That's what makes them so gripping. But we can't win by going on his show. We got a better show. And so this movement is about picking up the remote and changing the channel to something better. So that's a little bit about what I believe, what I plan to be doing as president, and why I am running. But I want to make sure we have a conversation. The rooms and the numbers are getting larger, but I figure this still qualifies as an intimate gathering enough that we can have a conversation. So we've gathered questions from folks who are here, and to help us navigate the Q&A, please welcome back to the stage Mackenzie, who is going to guide us in those questions. Here she is. Crowd, huh?
Great crowd.
All right.
All right. First question for Mayor Pete. What is your relationship to President Obama?
Is our questioner here? Who's
From Ruth Moreno.
There you go. Great. So, first of all, I'm an admirer of President Obama. This is somebody who operated under some terrible constraints, especially when you look at what happened in the Senate. And yet, he was able to reverse the trend toward a Great Depression in this country, move us out of the war in Iraq, rescue the auto industry of this country, which is a pretty important thing where I come from in the industrial Midwest. It's not bad for 8 years' work, what this president achieved. And while it is easy to say there are things we would do different, and it is certainly the case that we need to move things forward beyond what was achieved with the Affordable Care Act, by the way, although the Affordable Care Act has saved so many lives that we must defend it while it is on the books. But I'm a little puzzled that some folks are running against President Obama. I'm running against President Trump. I will also say we are fortunate that he's decided to commit his ex-presidency, among other things, to mentoring a younger generation of leaders in the arts, in community organizing, a little bit in politics too. And as part of a new generation emerging, I'm very glad that he's decided to invest his energies in that. So thanks for the question. Oh, sorry, one other thing about this. This is important, actually. If you dig in on the job growth number, because this president's making the case now, he's saying, you have to vote for me. Remember, he said, you have no choice but to vote for me because of the economy. And you think about it, under President Obama, unemployment, it was like 10 when he came in, and he got it down to 5. This president got it from 5 to 4, and he's like the rooster who thinks he made the sun come up on that one point. And now he's saying, you have no choice but to vote for me, right? And basically the message is, okay, you may not like the racism, you may not like the chaos, you may not like the bad example that's being set for your kids, but you got to support me because of the job growth. That's almost as good as the job growth was in the Obama years. What an argument. It shows you just how out of whack things are. But having said all of that, this is about what's next. And each moment is different. And the moment ahead of us, I think, is unlike anything we've seen, certainly in my lifetime. And that's why it's going to call for new solutions. It's not about going back to the Obama years or the Clinton years or any other time. It's about figuring out how to make the future better than the past, because there's no such thing as again in the real world.
All right. Next question. What are your plans for strengthening our public schools to provide every child with a quality education?
Great question. Is our questioner here? There you are. Are you involved in education? Okay, all right. We'll take it. So I married a teacher, so I get an education about education every time I come home. And the educators I know are dedicated. They bring it home with them when they're involved in education, but they're not getting the resources that they need. And so there are a lot of different things that need to happen across the K through 12 system in order to support our kids and support the next generation. But the biggest thing we need to do is support our teachers. And yes, that means pay them more. Teaching is a profession of unbelievable importance for the future of this country. And yet it's not being treated that way. It's not being viewed in the same professional lens as so many other important professions. I think if we honored teachers a little more like soldiers and paid them a little more like doctors, this would be a better country. But this is also why we do need to invest in mental health. It's why we need to make investments in supporting professional learning communities among educational professionals. It's why we need to be willing to use federal dollars to help smooth out the fact that it's actually the lowest income districts with the kids most in need that often have the fewest dollars per pupil going into supporting those kids getting a good future. You'd think it'd be the other way around, right? You'd think we'd invest more for those who need most. And that's part of what I aim to fix. And the other thing I would mention is that there's no question we need to do a lot around STEM education to prepare people for some of the technological fields that are needed. It is also true that humanities and arts education are not a luxury. They're not a luxury, they're a necessity. If for no other reason than that we are not only educating workers, we are educating citizens. And we want them to be strong citizens, which means having a wide-ranging education as they come out.
All right, next question. Would you want each high school graduate to do a national service? Maybe to forgive our college debt for 1 year, and that is by Patricia Ryan.
Great. Patricia here? Here somewhere. Oh, there you are. All right. Thank you. So, yeah, here's the way I would do it. I wouldn't do it as a requirement, but I would make it effectively the norm that everybody does it. The way I view it is if we get it right, what it'll look like is when you're applying, whatever you do after high school, whether you're applying for your first job right away, or you're applying to enter the military, or you're applying for college, the very first question you get on your application is, what did you do during your service year and what did you learn? That it just becomes universal. Now, if we want that to happen, we have to actually pay for it. And I think that's an investment in the future of this country. And when we do that, it will, first of all, be a benefit as you're doing it, because you're getting paid. But yes, I also believe that this should qualify for public service benefits. And I think we need to make it easier to access the public service loan forgiveness program. That's great in theory, but needs to be a lot more user-friendly. And then it will inspire more people to be involved for a whole career of public service in the future.
Do you think that a president should always get the consent of Congress explicitly to undertake military action?
Yeah, this is what I was getting to earlier. Is our questioner here, by the way? I want to make sure I can't see you. Be in here somewhere. Oh, hello. Hi. So yeah, I mean, part of why we are where we are is that I think Congress has walked away from its war powers. And so I would build in a 3-year sunset to every authorization for the use of military force. You know, when we lost soldiers in Niger on a counterterrorism mission, there were a lot of members of Congress who admitted they didn't even know we were in that country to begin with. Right now, we got folks deployed in East Africa based on a resolution passed to deal with Al-Qaeda. We're not that far off from the day when we're going to see news about a casualty in Afghanistan who was not born on 9/11. I thought I was one of the very last troops leaving Afghanistan 5 years ago. And right now, there's a soldier packing her bags, ready to go over there, probably wondering a little bit what the end game is and what the mission looks like. So I believe a big part of this has to be for Congress to step up. And as president, I will insist on congressional authorizations before committing troops on the ground in that way.
Describe your processes for appointing the Supreme Court justices.
Great question. By the way, let's all pray for the health and well-being of Justice Ginsburg. So the process, first of all, will involve identifying justices who have that same vision of freedom that I shared earlier. Justices and judges for the bench, by the way. And we should be a little more expansive in who we look to be on the bench. Nothing against the Ivy League, obviously. I'm partial to Harvard. But there should be a wider range of educational backgrounds going into the federal judiciary than we have today. And it should be as common to find people with a background in being, for example, a public defender as it is to find people with a background in prosecution. There should be some balance there. I'll look for people who think for themselves. It won't be about aligning with the partisan politics of the moment. But I will care very much about the judgment and the values that justices and judges put forward. Now, here's the other thing. I'm going to have to get somebody through the Senate. And you may have heard where Mitch McConnell in 2016 said it was a matter of principle that you would never vote on a justice in an election year. But then he said if it happened in 2020, he would totally have a vote. This is a problem because bipartisan negotiation relies on the basis of good faith. And what we're seeing is the current Senate majority leadership does not even pretend to be there in good faith. This is one reason why I agree with former Senator Harry Reid that we have to do away with the filibuster. And it's why it is really important. Of all the strategies for dealing with Mitch McConnell out there, by far the best one is for him not to be the majority leader anymore. And I need your help to make that happen. That means having a nominee with coattails.
What is your favorite symphony?
Oh. I didn't see that coming. Is our questioner here for that one? Just curious. Hi. What's your favorite symphony? Oh, yeah. All right, early. Interesting. All right, good. I'll go with Beethoven too, but I'm going to go for the seventh. It takes you through all the emotions. It's heroic, it's sad, it's up, it's down, it's moving, it's stirring. Yeah, I got to go with the seventh. Yeah. Now it's in my head. My father got one of the tunes from the seventh caught in his head for roughly 5 years, and whenever he was doing the dishes, he would be humming it. Maybe that's where it soaked into me. But
next question. If you become the Democratic nominee, how do you plan to unite the liberal and moderate wings of the party?
Great question. Good. Here? Thank you for your question. So, well, first of all, there's 20, 24, 22, whatever number of people running for president is now, that number minus one is going to not be the nominee. And all of those people, let's say the 23 people who are not going to be the nominee, need to rally around the one who is and unite as quickly as possible. And we've got to do it around our values. And again, in my view, these are American values. We don't have a monopoly on it. It's one of the reasons why I love seeing a lot of independents and even Republicans who are pretty horrified by what's happening in the White House thinking about crossing over. We also got to be true. I don't think we win them by pretending to be more conservative than we are. I think we win by being true to our values in such a way that even people with somewhat different values at least know that we came by our views honestly and choose to vote for that. And in that way, I think we can unite. It's not about getting everybody to agree on every single issue. It's about having a shared sense of the direction that this country is going in and where we need to take it. And the other really good news is most Americans are actually with us on all this. See, Democrats, I think we have this psychology where we're always inclined to be on the defensive, as if everything we were saying was unpopular and we had to hide from our ideas. There are some things that we may advance that aren't popular, but they're the right thing to do, and so we're for them anyway. But also, frankly, most Democratic policies are a lot more popular than the current president. Raising the minimum wage, universal health care, universal background checks, common sense gun safety reform, immigration reform. People want to do what we want to do. And we're going to have some differences on how to get there. That is healthy. It's fair game. It's what we'll hash out in this primary process. But at the end of the day, we are on the same team and we got to act like it.
Can you tell us what personally motivates you most when it comes to addressing the climate crisis, and why you will make it a top priority on the campaign trail and as president?
So, it's our question here. Well put. Well, hello anyway. There you are. So, what do your T-shirts say? Climate action. Excellent. And I can't make out your hat. What does that say? Make Earth cool again. Sounds like a good idea. Well, one thing that motivates me is it's really hard to look in the eyes of somebody any younger than I am and not say we're going to do a lot about this. Because the longer you're planning to be here, the more you have at stake in us getting this right. This isn't, in my view, it's not actually so much saving the planet. I mean, the planet in some form will be here no matter what. It's about saving opportunities and lives for those who are going to have to live on that planet and thrive. The personal thing that motivates me most in terms of what sticks in my head when I think about climate change is an experience I had as mayor of South Bend. Twice as mayor, I've had to activate our emergency operations center because of extreme flooding. One of them was a 1,000-year flood, and the other one was a 500-year flood. They happened 18 months apart. So either I got some crazy statistical luck swirling around me, I ought to get down to Foxwoods and try it out, or things are changing around us. The 1,000-year flood is no longer a 1,000-year flood. And I remember the night before the first day of school, during an August flood that created flash floods that destroyed homes because we had 7 inches of rain. I went to bed thinking it was one of those 5-minute rainstorms, and 2 hours later I was in that emergency operations center working on incident response. And a few hours after that, I'm on the porch of a woman who's got 4 kids on the west side of South Bend. It's a low-income neighborhood. Her home is flooded halfway through. It's a split-level home. The kids' toys are floating by cartoon style on the water. And she's saying, what am I supposed to do with my kids? It's the day before the first day of school. And I thought to myself, this is climate change. It's not pieces of ice falling off the Antarctic. It's not things happening in the distant future or off on the North Pole. It's happening in our neighborhoods, in our communities, in a million different ways. Wildfires in California, sea level rise in Florida. But even in the middle of the country, as far as you could get from either coast, in our little river city, people's lives being wrecked by the consequences of climate disruption. That's what motivates me, knowing how much we have on the line. And the other thing that motivates me is knowing how proud we would be, how good it would be for our country if we did something about it. Not just implemented some policies, but rallied as a country. We do better when we have a national project. It's like the moon landing. We had that 50-year anniversary of the moon landing. To picture what it was like for the country to summon its energies towards something hard. And by the way, lead the world in doing it, which wouldn't be a bad thing given how U.S. credibility is around the world these days, is we were leading in dealing with the global crisis, bringing out the energy of the American people. I think we would all stand taller and prouder if we did it. So that motivates me too.
I'm here today with my two school-age kids. As they prepare to return to school next week, they worry about gun violence. How specifically do you plan to help my kids, as well as the hundreds of thousands of others, to keep them safe?
Your kids here? How you doing? How old are you? And just a few more days of summer, huh? And then back to reality. 15 and 12, you said. I remember being 15 and I remember being 12. And it's not a super easy, I mean, it's fun, but it's also kind of hard. It's hard figuring out school. It's hard figuring out that homework start getting harder. Socially, it's a little harder. The last thing you should be worried about is your physical safety. Those of us who are in charge are supposed to deal with that so you don't have to. It is the last thing that should be on your mind. And we owe it to you to make sure that that's a reality. And you know what? Mom's got a lot of other things she should be juggling and worrying without worrying about your physical safety. And we know as a country things that we ought to do and things that America wants us to do, from universal background checks to red flag laws to dealing, I mean, the idea that the kind of weapons that I trained on or stuff like what I carried when I was in Afghanistan, the idea that that should be anywhere near an American school in a neighborhood in peacetime in 2019 is dead wrong. So the American people want these changes to happen. We need a president who's prepared to stand up to an NRA that doesn't even speak for gun owners anymore, just gun company executives. And the president has demonstrated no will to stand up to them. For like a hot minute, he at least pretended to be for background checks, and then the NRA called and he took his orders, and that was that. It's just wrong. And by the way, we also would not ban the CDC researching gun violence as a public health issue. Anytime there's a law against researching something, you got to ask yourself, what is it they don't want us to find out when we do the research? So my action plan on gun violence calls for us to deal with all of that, as well as add to, instead of subtract from, the Department of Homeland Security's program to deal with violent extremism, and work to build up the political and civic power to actually deliver something that most Americans want. And in the meantime, what's making the difference is the urgency of the questions coming from young people, demanding that we make sure that there's not another generation dealing with school shootings. And frankly, the power being demonstrated by moms like you in those red t-shirts who show up at literally every event I go to and demonstrate that the NRA is not the only game in town on these issues. So thank you for your activism and leadership too.
Arts support all areas of life. As an accomplished pianist person who speaks several languages and war veteran, will you increase art funding and support?
Absolutely. And is it? Are you? Hi. You already got one. That's okay. We're fellow symphony lovers. You can have two questions. Well, for one thing, as I said before, right? This is not just about generating workers. Our education system ought to be preparing us for life, and frankly, arts is a big part of that. Another really important thing about the arts is that at a moment when we have this crisis of being able to understand each other, One of the best ways for getting to know people who are very different from us is through art. It's what film does. It's what literature does, right? It puts you in somebody else's shoes, and it's through stories that we can picture one another's perspective, and that is in short supply right now, so we need a lot more of it. To me, it's almost a national security investment to make sure that we're doing more with the arts. It's even relevant from the perspective of economic development in the age of automation. Because the parts of our jobs that are going to go away are the parts you repeat all the time. Those can be done by a machine. And that means the parts of jobs that are going to become more important are things that involve critical thinking, involve dealing with ambiguous situations or exceptions to rules, or dealing with other people. And from an education perspective and a culture perspective, that's a big part of what arts does. So again, to me, this is not a luxury, it is a necessity, and it will be supported when I'm president.
All right, so we have time for one last question, Mayor Pete.
Oh, all right.
How would you deal with the insults and bluster of DT? What is the number one issue that you care most about?
You here? Sure. Hello. So, the issue that I most care about is the trajectory of our country and the shape of our democracy that'll make it possible, if we get it right, to deal with things like climate and gun violence and economic inequality, wages, and so on. As to how to deal with this president, I would think of it this way. First of all, it can't all be about him, but we have to deal with him. See, this is the trap. When he tells a lie, you got to address it. You got to say what the truth is. If he does something racist, you got to say that was wrong. But we cannot give him the power to change the subject. And so dealing with insults is not a problem for me. I grew up in Indiana and I'm gay. I'm not that worried about it. Bullying, not a problem. And, I learned how to keep my cool when the Taliban were shooting rockets at our base. I think I can keep my cool when he's sending tweets my way, too. But the best way to deal with him is to not let him change the subject, because the subject of an election is you. The subject of an election is, how is your life going to be different? How is your school going to be safer? How is our climate going to be more sustainable? How are we going to have more earnings in our pockets and strengthen our communities and deal with mental health? It's how are our lives going to be different? And the less we're talking about him, the more we get to be talking about you. So that's what this campaign is going to be about. And that's what I'm asking you to help me about. One more time for Mackenzie. We're rooting for you. We're excited for you. AmeriCorps alum. Really excited for your future. Thanks again for your help tonight.
Thank you.
Wow. All right. Look at this. All right. All right. I got to keep coming back up here. This is great. I just want to close with this reflection. I want to make the case for hope. And I know why hope has become a little bit less fashionable these days, because we know what we're up against. But I'm still motivated by it. I think getting involved in politics, showing up at an event like this, knocking on doors for somebody, running for office, voting itself is an act of hope. You only do it if you believe that it is possible to use the pulleys and levers of our system, of our government, to make life better in the everyday for us. That's why we do this. And even though we all know what we're up against, I am animated by a sense of hope right now. I'm picturing, looking in the eyes of kids in the not too distant future, I'm picturing running into your kids again, a few years from now, and being able to say, I'm sorry we let it get to that point, but aren't you proud of what we did in 2020? Isn't it great that in 2020 we stepped up, that we made it safer, that we made it more decent in this country? to stand up taller and say, we took care of these things for you. So by the time they're old enough to run for president, they're dealing with a whole different set of problems than the things that are on our table now, that we don't leave any of these problems for them. We fix them. It's the right thing to do. And we will be proud of ourselves and each other and our country when we make that happen. So, thank you. So all I have to ask is, can I look to you to spread that sense of hope and that sense of urgency and that sense of belief that it's worth getting involved? Are you with me on the idea of letting that show play itself out, picking up the remote and changing the channel? And will you help me win New Hampshire so that we can take that all the way to the White House? I'm pretty sure we got this, and I'll be working with you every step of the way from here to there. Thank you for your support. Thank you for your involvement. Thank you for caring about the future of this country. And I will see you on the trail. Thank you.